Okay, so looking through the sources you sent over, there's this real feeling of anxiety,
It's pretty clear.
Like we're drowning in news, constant updates on the economy, climate stuff, and then weirdly, these ancient prophecies popping up again.
Yeah, it's information overload, and it feels like none of it connects, or worse, it all conflicts.
Exactly. And you're left feeling sort of adrift, like what's actually solid ground here? What's genuinely real?
Right, that search for something verifiable.
So that's our mission for this deep dive, right? To pull out the core idea from these sources about finding that stability. How do we actually figure out what's real? Okay, let's unpack this.
Well, the approach proposed is surprisingly straightforward, almost primal in a way.
How so?
It's about stepping away from the screens, the predictions, all the noise, and literally digging for answers.
Like actual digging in the ground.
Exactly. Moving past the hot takes and the endless commentary to look at physical facts, stuff buried deep down.
So you bypass all the interpretation, the spin, maybe?
Precisely. You're moving past opinion, even memory, and becoming almost like a forensic investigator at times.
That's a big shift. How does digging in the dirt get around the uncertainty you have with, say, old texts or stories passed down? Those can change over time, right?
Absolutely. And that's where the method comes in. It's grounded in archaeology, specifically stratigraphy.
Stratigraphy.
Okay, it's the simple idea that what's physically deeper is older. It's a physical sequence. Unlike a text that can be copied, maybe changed, or just misunderstood over centuries.
A layer of ash from a fire or a buried wall.
Exactly. Those are fixed in time, fixed in place. Much harder to argue with.
Okay, and the sources really zeroed in on 4 specific types of evidence: pots, walls, coins, and inscriptions. Why those 4? Why are they the bedrock acts?
Good question. It's about what they certify. Take a coin. It's practically a historical document in metal.
How so?
Well, it usually has a ruler's name, maybe a date, tells you about the kingdom that issued it. It's a snapshot.
Okay, and inscriptions.
Those are primary texts, but they're carved in stone or baked into clay. Very hard to fake convincingly or move without leaving evidence.
Right, more permanent. And pots. Seems mundane.
But pots are really the broken pieces. The shards are incredibly important.
Why?
Because pottery styles change over time in distinct ways. Archaeologists have mapped this out. So finding certain types of shards in a layer helps you date that layer. They're like an archaeological clock.
Providing context that maybe a standalone text wouldn't have.
Precisely. They date the context. And walls, of course, show construction phrases, destruction layers, direct physical evidence of events.
Okay, so you have this objective science.
What's fascinating here is where the science gets applied in these sources. It's not just general history.
Right, it's focused.
It's this direct meeting, this intersection between hardcore archaeology and, well, the history of faith, ancient narratives, religious texts.
So using science to test stories that are thousands of years old.
Exactly. Using carbon dating, ceramic analysis, stratigraphy, using all these tools to see if established historical timelines actually line up with some of these ancient prophecies and accounts.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting then, because you're talking to potentially validating or challenging stories that are foundational for millions, maybe billions of people.
That's the core tension, yes?
Did these specific events, the ones written about maybe 3,000 years ago, actually happen?
That's the question being asked.
And could something as simple, as tangible as a bit of burnt debris or the style of pottery mixed in with it, could that actually prove or disprove a story that old?
That's the potential, yes. The idea is that the physical evidence, the dirt, the stones, they can act as an anchor, a way to ground these narratives or parts of them in something measurable.
Which, going back to the start, offers a kind of intellectual anchor against all the modern noise and uncertainty.
That's the hope. To see if modern science can rigorously test accounts that, for centuries, were accepted mainly on faith or tradition.
So what does this all mean then, boiling it down?
Well, I think the core insight is that there's a method, a tangible way to approach historical uncertainty.
By focusing on the physical stuff.
Yes. Shift from the arguments, the interpretations floating around, and focus on the objective evidence. A dated coin, a specific layer of ash, a type of pot shard. That provides a different kind of certainty.
Grounding history in physical reality.
Yeah. And think about this. If you can potentially prove, or maybe disprove, a story from 3 millennia ago using just a trowel and scientific analysis, what does that suggest about how solid our understanding is of other historical periods? Maybe even more recent ones built mostly on written accounts.
That other timelines might be waiting for that same kind of test.
Exactly. What else could be tested or confirmed by getting back to the physical evidence, that kind of rigorous, systematic checking? That's what might offer a truly reliable foundation for knowing what happened.
The notion that the Jewish temples acted as a simple good luck charm is inadequate. Rather, they were the physical center of the conditional covenant between God and the Jewish people. This covenant, detailed in Deuteronomy 28, explicitly tied national destiny, security, and prosperity to obedience to God's laws, and conversely, tied disaster and exile to disobedience. The two historical destructions of the temples are viewed within Jewish thought as the direct fulfillment of these curses. Following the loss of the Second Temple in 70 CE, Judaism shifted from a centralized sacrificial system to rabbinic Judaism based on prayer and scripture, a pivot that ensured survival but left a theological tension for traditionalists. This tension now fuels a minority demand for a third temple. However, this goal is blocked by the site's current status as the Haram al-Sharif, which contains the Dome of the Rock and the Al-Aqsa Mosque. Activist attempts to assert control directly erode the status quo, transforming the sacred aspiration into the greatest generator of geopolitical instability in the region, linked to major violence.
We're doing something pretty ambitious.
Yeah, what's that?
We're looking at this incredible timeline, both architectural and, well, spiritual.
Okay.
We're tracing the line from, like, a portable tent in the desert all the way to these massive future structures, a mile square, apparently.
That's the plan. Basically, we want to give you the quick guide, the lineage of Israel's sacred spots.
Right.
From that blueprint, the Tabernacle, through 5 temples that followed, and we'll hit, their purpose, how big they were, and what finally happened to them. Often pretty dramatic.
And it breaks down neatly, doesn't it? 3 that definitely existed historically.
Yes. Solomon's, Zerubbabel's, and Herod's.
And then 2 more that are described in prophecy.
The Tribulation Temple and the Millennial Temple, that's right.
Okay, but before we talk size, we need that unit of measurement, don't we?
Absolutely. The cubit, it comes up constantly in the early sources.
And it's not quite exact, is it?
No, it varied a bit. But for our purposes today, let's just think of a cubit as roughly 18 inches.
Okay, 1.5 feet, or about 45 centimeters for metric listeners.
Exactly. That helps picture the scale we're dealing with.
Got it. Okay, let's dive in at the beginning of this whole idea of a sacred space. Hashtag I. The blueprint and the first fixed house, the Tabernacle in Solomon's Temple.
Right, so we don't start with the building, actually. We start with the prototype, Moses' tabernacle.
Traveling sanctuary.
Precisely. It moved with the Israelites for, 40 years in the desert. It was designed fundamentally as God's dwelling place right there among the people, a sign of his presence on the journey.
And the plans for this big tent, they came directly from God to Moses on Mount Sinai.
That's what the sources state. Very detailed plans. And size-wise, it wasn't enormous in height, maybe 10 cubits high.
So around 15 feet.
Yeah, about that. But the layout was key. You had the outer court, then the holy place inside, and then the absolute holiest part, the most holy place.
Highly symbolic layer.
It's deeply symbolic. And in that innermost room, that's where they kept the Ark of the Covenant.
Containing the tablets of the law, the 10 Commandments.
Correct. The whole setup, the layout, the rituals, it wasn't random. It was meant as a kind of object lesson, you know, showing how sinful people could approach a holy God step by step.
Okay, so that portable model eventually gets replaced by something permanent.
Yes, Solomon's Temple, the first temple. Built in Jerusalem, kicking off around 964 BC, give or take.
Now, wait a minute. I thought David, his father, gathered all the materials and had the plans. Why is it always called Solomon's Temple?
That's a really good question. And it highlights something we see again and again. David did have the plans and the materials.
Right.
But according to the sources, he wasn't allowed to build it himself because he'd been a man of war.
Okay.
So the credit and the name goes to the one who actually built it, who executed the plan and dedicated it. That was Solomon. We'll see this pattern with Herod later too.
Interesting. So Solomon takes his dad's plans and essentially doubles the size of the tabernacle.
Pretty much, yeah. The main building was 60 cubits long, 20 wide, 30 high.
So about 90 feet long, 30 feet wide, 45 feet high, considerably bigger.
Definitely. But the really striking part, architecturally and theologically, was the inner room.
The Holy of Holies, or the Oracle, sometimes called.
Yes, the sources are clear on this. It was a perfect cube.
A cube.
20 cubits by 20 cubits by 20 cubits. So 30 feet in every dimension.
Wow. Why a cube? Was that just like an aesthetic choice?
Unlikely. The perfect cube is loaded with symbolism. Think completeness, perfection, stability, God's perfect, unchanging presence established on earth, unlike the temporary tent before it.
That makes sense. But even with all that grandeur and symbolism, it didn't last forever. How long did it stand?
About 450 years, give or take. Which sounds like a long time, but...
But its end was violent.
Very. Tied into the whole geopolitical mess of the time, Nebuchadnezzar and the Babylonians swept in around 587, 586 BC.
And they didn't just conquer, they destroyed it.
Ransacked and burned it to the ground. A total devastation.
And this is when it happened, right? The big mystery, the Ark of the Covenant.
Gone. Vanished during the destruction.
Disappeared. No record of where it went.
None that's definitive. And the impact was immense. The Ark was the symbol of God's presence in that specific spot.
So when it was lost,
that inner room, the perfect cube, the most holy place, was left empty. And it stayed empty, even when the temple was rebuilt later. That changed everything.
So an empty Holy of Holies, that must have cast a shadow over everything that came next.
It definitely defined that next era. After 70 years in Babylon, the exiles, the Judeans, were allowed to return.
Led by Zerubbabel.
Right, Zerubbabel, who's basically royalty, Prince of Judah, and their first big task, rebuilding the temple. This became Zerubbabel's temple, or the second temple.
And they got it done pretty quickly, didn't they? Around 515 BC.
Relatively quickly, yeah. But the sources, like in Haggai, they mention the older folks who remembered Solomon's temple.
They were disappointed.
Deeply disappointed. It just, well, it failed in comparison. It was functional. Built out of necessity on a budget, you could say.
A scaled back version.
Very much so. The main goal was just to get the sacrifices going again, to have that central place of worship back after the exile. The records mention it being 90 feet high and wide.
Which was probably the porch area.
That's the general assumption, yeah. But the inside, it lacked the gold, the sheer opulence, maybe even, some felt, the spiritual presence of the first one.
Okay, so functional, but not spectacular. Until
Herod the Great steps onto the stage. Now, technically, what Herod built starting around 20 BC is still considered the Second Temple period.
Because it was built on Zerubbabel's foundation.
Exactly. It's a massive renovation and expansion of Zerubbabel's structure. But the scale was something else entirely. It almost feels like a different building.
Herod wasn't known for subtlety, was he? I remember reading, he who hasn't seen Herod's building hasn't seen a beautiful building.
That's the saying. His ambition was huge. He wanted the Temple Mount to be the most magnificent religious platform anywhere.
So how big are we talking?
The enclosure, the whole platform area, he expanded it massively. Roughly 2,500 feet north to south. That's almost half a mile. Wow. And about 1,000 feet east to west. And get this, the western wall, the kotel that people pray at today.
Yeah.
That's just the remaining piece of Herod's retaining wall holding up that massive platform. His walls were like 500 meters long.
That really puts the modern site in perspective.
Yeah.
Incredible. And you mentioned a detail about the height.
Oh yeah. The pinnacle, the high point of the temple structure itself. The sources suggest the spot where Satan tempted Jesus was an astounding 164 feet high.
That's like a 15-story building.
Pretty much. Just imagine standing up there.
Unbelievable. And this whole massive project took decades.
It did. Herod himself died long before it was totally finished. The final touches weren't completed until AD 64.
Which is just wow, because only 6 years later.
6 years, AD 70. The Romans under General Titus during the Jewish revolt.
It destroyed it completely.
Leveled it, exactly as Jesus had predicted, according to the gospel. Not one stone left on another for the main building. Hashtag 203. The purpose and pivotal change.
Okay, so we've gone from a tent to a cube to this colossal structure built by Herod. Across all these variations, what was the main point? What was the core job of these buildings?
Fundamentally, it stayed the same. It was always the symbolic dwelling place of the Lord.
God's house on earth, sort of.
In a manner of speaking, yeah. It was the center for national identity, for worship, and crucially for the sacrificial system.
All those offerings, sin offerings, burnt offerings, peace offerings.
Exactly. The whole ritual system for dealing with sin and maintaining that relationship with God, it all centered there.
And it seems like Solomon's temple was more than just religious space, right? The sources call it a forum, a fortress, even a university.
It was definitely the heart of the nation in almost every way. Solomon himself sometimes participated in the sacrifices, blurring the lines between king and priest in a way.
Then with Herod's expansion, that massive size served a practical purpose too.
Oh, absolutely. You needed that space. Think about the huge crowds coming for the big three festivals every year. Passover, Shavuot, Sukkot.
Pilgrims from all over.
Exactly. So Herod's design had these very specific separate courts. A court for priests, a court for women.
And even a court for Gentiles, right? Non-Jews?
Yes, the court of the Gentiles, the outermost court, accessible to everyone, including those considered ritually unclean. It structured how close different people could get.
And of course, Herod's temple is the backdrop for so much of the New Testament.
It really is. Jesus teaching there, chasing out the moneylenders.
Right, the cleansing of the temple.
And that temptation scene on the pinnacle we mentioned. It's central.
So the temple's life, its function, it's all building towards something.
It really seems to be. The whole sacrificial system finds its theological climax, you could say, right at the very end of Jesus' life.
You're talking about the veil.
The veil, that heavy curtain separating the holy place from the most holy place.
The one only the high priest could go behind once a year.
That's the one. And the sources, Matthew 27, for instance, state that at the moment Jesus died,
It tore from top to bottom.
torn in two, spontaneously and symbolically. That's huge. That veil was the barrier. It represented the separation between sinful humanity and God's pure holiness.
So when it tore,
It signified that the barrier was removed. The old system, centered on that physical place and those repeated animal sacrifices, was fulfilled. It was finished. Direct access to God was now open to anyone through faith in Christ, not just the high priest once a year behind the curtain. # temples yet to come.
okay, so the physical buildings kept getting destroyed, and then this huge symbolic event, the veil tearing, happens. That seems like an ending.
An ending to the historical temples, yes, but then the narrative pivots. We move into structures described not in history books, but in prophetic vision.
Right, the future temples still to come.
Correct. Two more. First up is what's often called the Tribulation Temple. Some might call it the third temple, historically speaking, or fourth temple if you count the Tabernacle.
And the timing for this one.
Prophetic interpretations generally place its rebuilding sometime before the halfway point of the 7-year tribulation period described in books like Daniel and Revelation.
And why rebuild it? What's its purpose?
Seems its main purpose is specifically to restart the old Levitical system. Animal sacrifices, the whole thing, which haven't happened since AD 70.
So a temporary return to the old ways.
Very temporary, and its significance becomes quite dark. Midway through that 7-year period, this temple becomes the stage for a major event.
This is where the Antichrist figure comes in.
Exactly. Prophecy describes him standing in the temple declaring himself to be God.
Which is called the Abomination of Desolation. That sounds pretty bad.
It's basically the ultimate act of blasphemy and desecration. He stops the sacrifices to the true God and demands worship for himself right there in God's holy place. Sets up an image, likely.
Wow. Okay, and where would this temple even be built? The Temple Mount is occupied right now.
That is the million-dollar question, isn't it? There's intense debate and speculation. Some interpretations, looking at passages like Revelation 11, suggest it might be built alongside the existing Dome of the Rock.
Really? Side by side?
Possibly. Maybe without the large outer court described in Revelation. It's highly contested territory, obviously.
Understood. Okay, so that's the Tribulation Temple. What's the final one?
The final one is the Millennial Temple, the grand finale, you might say.
And who builds this one?
This one, according to prophecy like Zechariah chapter 6, verse 13, is built by the Messiah, by Christ himself, when he returns to establish his 1,000-year kingdom on earth.
His millennial reign.
Exactly. And this temple will be the center of worship for the whole world during that time. God dwelling in the midst of the children of Israel forever, as Ezekiel puts it.
Okay, we talked about scale. Tabernacle was 15 feet high. Herod's pinnacle, 160 odd feet. What are the dimensions for this one?
Get ready for this. The scale is almost unimaginable by today's standards. The total area described, for instance, in Ezekiel is 500 reeds on each side.
Reeds, not cubits. How long is a reed?
A reed is typically understood as about 6 long cubits, so maybe around 10 feet or slightly more.
So 500 reeds, that's like 5,000 feet. Almost a mile per side.
That's the calculation. Roughly 1 square mile for the entire sacred complex.
Square mile. Just for the temple area, that's enormous. How would that even fit?
Well, the sheer size suggests massive geological changes would have to happen first. Prophecies like Zechariah 14 mention the Mount of Olives splitting in two,
Right.
creating a large valley. It implies a reshaping of the entire landscape to accommodate God's final earthly administrative center and dwelling place. #tag outro.
What a journey.
Here.
Seriously. From a little tent you could pack up and move to Solomon's perfect cube, then Herod's absolutely massive stone complex.
Which it gets destroyed.
Right, destroyed. And then these future visions of another temple for sacrifices, followed by this square mile structure for a global kingdom.
It's quite the progression.
Yeah.
But through it all, that core idea remains, doesn't it?
Yeah.
A designated place symbolizing God's presence with his people.
Until that pivotal moment with the veil tearing, that really shifted things.
It absolutely did.
Yeah.
Signifying the end of the need for that specific kind of localized, sacrifice-based system.
And that point you made earlier about the names Solomon, Zerubbabel, Herod that clicks now,
Yeah, it's not always the person with the initial idea, like David.
or the one who laid the first foundation, like Zerubbabel for Herod's build.
Right. It's typically named after the main builder or the one who did the major renovation.
Yeah.
That gave that particular phase its distinct identity.
That makes a lot of sense. Okay. Okay, so for our final thought today, something for you, our listener, to think about.
Go for it.
We've seen how the physical temples, these magnificent structures, were vulnerable. Destroyed by Babylon, destroyed by Rome, powerful empires just wiped them out. So consider what the sources seem to suggest about this shift. Moving from focusing on a physical house that could be, well, demolished, to the kind of direct personal access symbolized by that torn veil after AD 70. What does this whole story suggest about permanence? Is it found in stone buildings, however sacred, or somewhere else entirely? Something to chew on?
We spend a lot of time, digging into external evidence, historical stuff, archaeology, basically digging in the dirt to see if ancient events line up.
Right, trying to find that physical proof.
Exactly. But today, our source material takes a really different approach. It suggests the most, undeniable proof.
Right.
It isn't some ruin out there. It's found inside, in a conversation, a personal moment.
Yeah, and that's the real tension here, isn't it? That's what we're diving into. The claim is that, the bedrock for faith, it often bypasses the physical entirely.
So it's not archaeological, it's personal.
Precisely. The proof is argued to be an internal realization. That's the core idea we need to unpack.
Okay, so let's get into this central story they use. It's about a cab ride, right?
And that's the one.
You've got the driver, just focused on the meter, trying to, keep things moving, no distraction.
He's doing his job, yeah.
And then the passenger, she's described as this military powerhouse, a real hardcore veteran, life totally locked down, emotions in check.
Total control, or at least the appearance of it. And that's where the story gets interesting, this collision between absolute discipline and something bigger, tragedy.
Yeah, her whole identity was built on strength, on control. But the source pinpoints this moment, this breaking point.
Her point of failure, yeah. It's the realization that human strength, human wisdom, it just hits a wall eventually.
And for her, that wall came up hard. She saw a friend murdered.
Described as just pure, open, indefensible darkness. A moment where her strength meant nothing.
Right. All that power, all that discipline. The source says it became suddenly useless.
Poof, gone. The whole structure she'd built just collapsed.
And it was right there in that moment of seeing her own limits that she found faith instead of relying on herself.
She reached for something else, and the source claims by the end of this short cab ride, these two strangers, it became a kind of secret space.
Left them both teary-eyed, apparently.
Yeah, and that emotional shift, that breakdown and breakthrough, that's presented as the ultimate proof point. The moment human strength admits defeat.
So when you hit that wall, that absolute limit, what then? What does the source say is needed?
Well, it concludes that those really deep anxieties, the biggest heartaches, they demand something more than you can give them.
More than human muscle or smarts.
Exactly. They require a divine connection. And the material tries to back this up, pointing to specific ideas when we can't lean on ourselves anymore.
Okay, so where do they point first?
First up, it's about God giving his spirit. The idea is that the spirit acts as proof that we're connected to him and he to us.
Internal proof.
Right. The source calls it the GPS you can trust. An inner confirmation, not an outer one.
That makes sense, given the story. If the realization is internal, the proof needs to be internal too. But how do you even start down that path?
Good question. The source stresses that it begins by, turning away from trying to handle it all yourself.
And they call that step repentance.
Yes, repentance. But it's important how they frame it. It's not just, feeling sorry or guilty. It's presented more as a complete change of course. Turning away from self-reliance, from the idea that you can manage those huge life-sized worries that broke the veteran. It's admitting you need something more.
Acknowledging the need.
And then it pivots. It brings up the idea that redemption is offered completely unconditionally.
Unconditionally, meaning?
Meaning it doesn't matter who you are, what you've done, your status, your mistakes, none of it. The offer through grace in Jesus Christ stands regardless. Your past ledger doesn't factor in.
Wow, okay. That's a big claim. No conditions.
It is, and the source argues this grace, this unconditional acceptance, is the only foundation strong enough, the only thing that can actually stop those huge, overwhelming anxieties from completely taking over your life.
So it's the stability that human strength, even the veteran's discipline, could never provide.
Exactly, that's the core argument. Human effort hits a wall. This grace provides a foundation.
Okay, so we often focus on finding that external evidence, making sure it's out there, right? Confirming history, prophecies.
The digging in the dirt.
Yeah, but the twist here is profound. The solution they offer, salvation, redemption, is presented as totally unconditional, based only on grace, internal.
Right. The historical proof might confirm the setup, the timeline, maybe, but the answer offered is entirely personal and free.
So here's the thought to leave you with. If the external evidence confirms the background, but the actual solution is presented as unconditional and internal, what does that practically mean for how you define certainty, how you find your own foundation? Something to think about.